are the cream of the crop. These guys are the cream of the crop. This wasn't, and what I like to say, and we had a father, yes, that was a Tuskegee Airman, and in the house he did not talk about the Tuskegee Airmen all the time, but I think some of the characteristics and some of the principles that people can take from the Tuskegee Airmen is that, first of all, they excelled and they were focused. And one of the ways that they were able not to become angry is because they had a mission, they had a goal, they were focused. And anyone can utilize that in their lives. I mean, anybody. They were examples, they are still examples now, that's why they are heroes. And everyone is an example for someone. I don't care who you are, I don't care how young you are, how old you are. The way you live your life is an example for someone because someone is looking at you. So this is why we want to continue the legacy. We want to encourage people to ask teachers. You know, I don't see the Tuskegee Airmen in my history book. You don't have to be confrontational, but you can say, you know, I've heard that the Tuskegee Airmen were a part of history. I don't see it in my history book. Can I do a report on it? Can I bring you some information from the internet? Whatever the case may be, because we have to continue this legacy of excellence and perseverance. And that's what we do. So that's what I'm saying.
I have a picture around here somewhere floating around. Where is, oh, okay, there it is, okay. And what she is talking about here, the students are in their navigation class, the cadets. Okay.
All right, Ben. President Ben.
Oh, no, we've got Mr. Winfro back there. You didn't volunteer, so now you were selected.
I don't like that word.
We have Mr. Winfro. Come on up and say a few words. Also, we want to think about that we talk about when we think of the Tuskegee Airmen, we think of nothing but men. Understand there were about 15,000 African-American men and women involved in this. And as she pointed out, the cream of the crop, take it into the context that this was a social study going on. And if these guys had failed, what would the government have surmised from it? Well, we took the smartest from your group. And they couldn't cut it. So our experiment, or this study that's solicited, must be true. So let's give them another hand. Okay? A lot of studies, you know, from anthropologists to say that they have smaller brains. Their cranial capacity is not as what it is for others. Therefore, their brains must be smaller. So from that, we can deduce that they must not be as intelligent. So, Mr. Winfro, your turn.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My given name is Everett, which was a fighting word when I grew up. Like Cecil or Marmaduke. So I started being called Pete. Anybody that addresses me as Everett knew me from grammar school. Well, I didn't have the privilege of going to Tuskegee. I volunteered in November 1942. And I made the mistake. 166 Van Buren was the section which all military people left Chicago going to their various bases. I called home and told Mom, I'll see you. As soon as I get to base, I'll write you a letter, so forth and so on. Okay, and I went, grabbed my little 3 days clothing and sat in a corner. About an hour and a half later, two of the biggest MPs I've ever seen stood up and looked, Renfro? Yeah. Come with me, please. And they took my little papers. I qualified. I was going to go to Randolph Field, Texas. as an aviation cadet. Took me and says, thank you very much. When you're 18, come back. I was 17. November 2nd, 1943, on my 18th birthday. You got your greetings being selected again. A month or two later, you got your physical. And a month or two later after that, you got your grade, 4F or 1A, whatever you're going to be like that. And then the fourth time was your order to report for induction. November the 2nd, 1943, I got all 4 pieces of paper in the same envelope. So I reported up to Fort Sheridan, and they said, okay, they're going to send me to Camp Ellis. I said, oh, no, I'm an aviation cadet. He says, well, yes, you are, but we're going to send you where we want to send you. You're in the Army now. I went to where Western Illinois University is now, McComb. That was Camp Ellis, Illinois, just outside that thing, 127,000 acres. Took my training, and I went overseas as an engineer. An Army engineer. Europe, and from there, when we finished the war in Europe, we went to the Pacific, and we wound up the war there. I was on my way for the invasion of Japan on VJ Day, when they finally just dropped the bomb. I kept trying, and it took me another 8 years to get to flight school. But I made it, and I enjoyed it. And all I got to say is, I wish that, well, let me say this, my background was aviation. I had a pilot's license when I was 16. When I was 18, I came home and did most of my flying with Coffey and the people that we all know here, Willa Brown and stuff like that, on my furlough from the Army. I got my pilot's license, pushed up to private ticket, and went on. So the Army would have not been teaching me to fly, it would have been teaching me to fly military airplanes. But I enjoyed it, and I think in retrospect, I won't rehash exactly what these gentlemen have told you about prejudice and so forth. It ran rampant and it was wide open in 1943 and 44. Here in Illinois, in Camp Ellis, they pulled us engineers out to pull it into a little town called Anna. It was going underwater from the Spoon River. We worked for 2 days. We lost the mess truck somewhere, filling sandbags and building up the levees. Went into town and they would not feed us. In uniform, and they would not feed us. We're a black unit with white officers. The officers went in and bought bologna and whatever they could get to feed us. But things like this I remember. Later, Fort Benning, Georgia, July 1951, I was recalled to active duty for Korea. I got my little gold bar, and I was a second lieutenant. White enlisted men did not salute black officers. 1951. That changed about 55. But all the way down the line, people look carefully, there's a difference between Army wings and Army wings. In 1944, it was the Army Air Corps. In 1948, when the Air Force came into being, they kept the original wings were straight, so the Army, to designate, curled our wings up on the corner. So I got my rating, and I'm fortunate enough, in fact, that I'm dual rated. I can fly anything the Army has, fixed and rotary wing. In fact, I probably got more helicopter time than I've got fixed wing time. But it's been an enjoyable experience, believe me. Thank you.
All right. And now, last but not least, the president of the Chicago Dodo chapter. Dodo, a bird they said that lost its wings and ability to fly, but not these dodos. They're still flying. They're still our heroes. Beverly Dungill, the president of the Chicago chapter, Tuskegee Airmen.
Good evening, everyone.
Go on, hold your picture too then. Oh, yeah. Don't hold your picture, take ownership.
Looks like Cock Dingle from here.
Oh, it looks like who? Oh, shit. Oh, we won't be able to talk with him this month.
I guess this was made 200 years ago. When I had hair. Actually, I'm the baby of the group. And I'm only 77. So everybody is older than me.
Yeah, that's him. Huh?
But I didn't get a chance to fly combat during World War II. I was at Tuskegee, but I didn't get a chance to fly combat in World War II like Bob and George and a few others that went overseas because the war had ended before I went into service. That is in Europe. But I did go to Tuskegee. As Bill mentioned, he went down to Keesler Field. I went to Keesler Field as well, and I've always considered that as part of my Battle of South America, Keesler Field, Mississippi. But how many, well, I'll ask the rhetorical question. How long does it take you to have a physical examination?
Couple hours.
People answer maybe 45 minutes, hour, something like in that area. Well, when I went in, went in 45. I said I was a youngster. I had just turned 18. Went up to Fort Sheridan, and they sent me to Keesler Field, Mississippi, and for the physical examination, physical, psychological, and psychomotive examination. The physical lasted 3 days. Believe me, they went and looked at everything from the dirt under your toenails to the oil in your hair, because they did not want to pass lights to fly. They examined us every day for 3 straight days. As I said, when you ask the question, how long does it take for you to have a physical examination, the average person will say 1 hour, 2 hours, maybe 45 minutes, something like that. This lasted 3 days. Well, we got to, after the week was up, we were sent to Tuskegee, and a little place just outside of Tuskegee was where we got off the train about this time of night, 𝒥𝑜𝒽𝓃, Alabama. Another battle of South America. That's where you start your flight training, where you start your training. And when you're assigned to a class, as was mentioned, they had the caste system in the class. You are the lowest thing on the field. And they tell you you're so low you look up to worms. Well, that's true. And you have to be in excellent physical condition, because your upperclassmen will tell you what to do, and at the slightest provocation, even without any provocation at all, they'll say, "Mister, give me 50 push-ups." You don't get down on the floor and give them 50 push-ups. You go straight forward and catch yourself on the floor this way. And then you start doing push-ups. when you reach around 25 or 30, they'll say, "Are you getting tired?" Of course, you never say no. But they'll tell you, "Well, okay, rest yourself and take just, do them with one hand." So you're now pushing up with right hand or left hand. The first 6 weeks of your class is why you're called a dodo, because you're not flying, you're in what's called pre-flight. And this is a period where you go to ground school, and again you have who knows how many physical examinations all over again. They look at you about maybe 2 or 3 times a week during pre-flight, in case they miss something, and they're going to find it. Again, you get up at 4:30 in the morning, literally scrub the barracks floor every morning, and then you have breakfast, have physical examination, physical training, and go to ground school. And again, the whole thing all over again, every day. Then you go to Molten Field, which is just outside of Tuskegee, to primary flight training. That's where you fly perhaps the best flying airplane in the world. That's the old Stearman. It's a 2-wing airplane, biplane, as it's called, 175 horsepower engine. And to back up a little bit, everyone was talking about their beginnings. I was brought up in Chicago, went to school in Chicago, and like Pete, I was flying when I was 16 years old. I met Mr. 𝒥𝑜𝒽𝓃-𝑀𝒸𝒬𝓊𝑒𝓃, Willa Brown, Janet Bragg, Lydia Thornton, all of the guys of history, you might say, the pioneers in aviation. All of them happened to be black. And I've had a very, very rich history in the people that I knew, and of course was by whom I was trained. I was flying when I was 16. Back in those days, you had to be 18 before you could drive a car. So I could legally fly an airplane before I could legally drive a car, which I did. At any rate, as was mentioned before, it is in the archives in Washington. I'll not quote it exactly because I can't, but I will paraphrase it, and that is that blacks do not have the mental capacity to cope with the technology of today's aircraft. In other words, we're not smart enough to fly. Well, that kind of sits a little wrong with me because I've been flying for 2 years. Now all of a sudden they're telling me I can't fly. And they didn't tell me that I couldn't fly, but because I continued to fly. And when I got to Tuskegee, I went from, when I started flying, I was flying in a Piper Cub. It had a 40 horsepower engine, which is just a little more powerful than your lawnmower. And when I got to Tuskegee, now I'm flying in a 175 horsepower airplane, which is, hey, that's like for me going in from a scooter to a Cadillac. And I just, I almost went crazy. That was fantastic. But again, you go from the Stearman into the VT-13. I think that's about 450 horse engine, and then from the Volti vibrator into the AT-6, which is a 650 horse engine, retractable landing gear. Anyway, again, the war had ended, and I was declared surplus. Came out a very, very short period of time, and I went back in, and I went back into the service, transitioned into jets. I then trained in F-80 jet fighters, and also transitioned into F-86s, which again is a more powerful jet fighter. And they sent me into Korea. I flew 100 combat missions in Korea in jets. That picture, by the way, that's the, can't see it too much, but that's a picture of my aircraft. There is another picture someplace of me, but at any rate, I did fly 100 combat missions in Korea. Now, when you talk about Tuskegee and the experiences at Tuskegee, there are many and varied. I have experienced many things. Of course, as was mentioned before on the discrimination that took place, there are different ways that you can get back at people for the discrimination that they act against you. And one such way is that this Stearman plane that I loved so much and still do, between Tuskegee and Columbus, Georgia, there's a pretty straight road. And the Greyhound bus used to go from one point to the other, from Tuskegee to Columbus. Well, having flown before, and flying was not new to me, I would take the airplane, of course, after checking out the area and make for wires and high tension wires and whatnot. I would literally fly down, and as a bus would go along the highway, take that bus and land right on the top of the bus, and put a nice big dent in it. Drop down in front so that they couldn't see the buzz numbers, pull up, and then flip away. Now, I never saw the end result of this, but you can only imagine the bus driver when he gets to Columbus with this dent on the top, and he's saying that this guy landed an airplane on the bus. Now, they didn't want us to fly anyway, and they were saying we couldn't fly. But now, the bus driver, I can imagine the bus driver saying, yeah, he landed this airplane on top of the bus. They're saying, no, he can't, these people can't fly. And you're trying to tell me that he landed the bus going down the highway while you're going down the highway about 70 miles an hour. Well, at any rate, that was fun. But, you know, there are many buses back in those days that had kind of dents on the top of the buses. But, again, some of the bad things that happen, we went to Columbus on one of these buses, military buses, to a football game. Tuskegee was playing some other college. I have no idea who it was. They lost, by the way. But when we came out, after the game was over, we were told to stand at one point where the bus would pick us back up. All right, so we're waiting now in a group.